Hey everybody, this is GGB, and I got it, guys. I got the dub. It wasn't the biggest upset of the day, but it was an upset. And guess what, guys? We're going on 4 straight days with an upset. Pretty dang impressive, if you do ask me. I mean, we got Tuesday upset, we got a Wednesday upset, we got a Thursday upset, and not only that, we got 2 upsets on Friday. Let's freaking go. Let's go, guys. Let's hope we get this streak continue on Saturday. I'm really kind of hyped. I really want this streak to continue. Probably it will, because Saturday is one of those days that if it doesn't happen the rest of the week, it's likely to happen on Saturday because there's just so many to choose from. One of them's got to hit. So let's go over the games really quickly. Obviously, I'm going to go over what happened last night. Big Ten standings wise, it was pretty crazy if you ask me. Michigan State, despite being third place heading into today, is now owns first place in the Big Ten all by themselves. Pretty impressive. Spartans. Wisconsin, big loss. Now they're tied for second place with Illinois. Illinois, also huge loss. What are you doing fighting Illini? Losing that game you kind of had to have against Maryland to keep control of the Big Ten, and you didn't. You lost it. Against entering it with the number 13 team in the Big Ten, even with the win as number 12. I mean, it is not a good loss on your resume, Illinois, especially even if it's in College Park. It's not good. It's a bad loss. But regardless, we got now Michigan State owns first place. Wisconsin and Illinois are tied for second place. And Ohio State's they're only half a game back. They just need a win, and they're tied for second place, which is huge in this very competitive Big Ten race. And then obviously Maryland with the win got over Minnesota. Again, there's not a big difference between being the 13 and 12 seed, but it matters not at all. But let's get into all the games that we have going on today, and there is a crap ton of them. So let's start listing them off real quick. 11 o'clock got Syracuse, which is in 9-9, traveling to number 6 Duke, which is at 14-3. Favored by 11.5 points on ESPN. 11 o'clock got number 11 Villanova, which is at 13-5, traveling to Georgetown, which is at 6-9. Villanova favored by 14 points on Fox. At 11 o'clock, we got West Virginia, which is at 13-4, traveling to number 18, Texas Tech, which is at 14-4. Texas Tech favored by 9 points on ESPN2. 12 o'clock at number 12, Kentucky, which is at 15-3, traveling to number 2, Auburn, which is at 17-1. Auburn favored by 3.5 points on CBS. 1 o'clock, we got Oklahoma State, which is at 10-7, traveling to number 23, Texas, which is at 13-5. Texas favored by 7.5 points on ESPN2. 2 o'clock with number 5, Baylor, which is at 16-2, traveling to Oklahoma, which is at 12-6. Baylor favored by 3.5 points on ESPN+. 2:30, we got Missouri State, which is at 14-6, traveling at number 22, Loyola Chicago, which is at 14-2. Favored by 7 points on CBS Sports Network. At 7 o'clock, at 3 o'clock, we got number 7, Kansas, which is at 15-2, traveling to Kansas State, which is at 10-7. Kansas favored by 7 points on ESPN+. 3 o'clock, we got TCU, which is 12-3, traveling to number 15, Iowa State, which is at 14-4. Iowa State favored by 6.5 points on ESPN2. 5 o'clock, we got East Carolina, which is at 11-6, traveling to number 10, Houston, which is at 16-2. Houston favored by 19.5 points on ESPN2. 5 o'clock at number 13, LSU, which is at 13-3, traveling to number 24, Tennessee, which is 12-5. Tennessee favored by 5 points on ESPN. 5:30, we got number 16, USC, at 15-2, traveling to Utah, which is at 8-11. USC favored by 6 points on the Pac-12 network. And at 8 o'clock, we got number 9, UCLA, which is at 12-2, traveling to Colorado, which is at 12-5. UCLA favored by 4 points on the Pac-12 network. I know there was a lot for you guys to digest, but we're going to go through it conference by conference in all these games one by one. So let's start with the ACC. ACC is a conference I'd like to talk a bit about because it's an interesting enough conference that I'd like to have a conversation about it. And there is, let me count real quick, I believe only one game. Only one ranked ACC team playing there. I don't believe there's more than one ranked ACC team now that I think about it. I think Duke's the only one that is ranked. They're number 6, right? With a win for Duke, they would move to 5-2, tied for Florida State for second place in the ACC. Again, Miami owns sole possession of first place. So with a win, Duke moves to second place. With a loss, Duke falls pretty dramatically. You would fall below, obviously, Duke and UNC and Notre Dame, who you're tied with right now for third place, right? Obviously, you'd lose that. You sit at 4-3. Then you'd have Wake Forest, Louisville, Virginia, who all sit at 5-3. You would fall to 4-3, would be below them. So you're talking about Duke, who is right now tied for third place you would be falling to 8th place. From falling from tied for third, to falling to 8th place. By the way, with a Syracuse win, you're talking about you get to move to 4-4 if you're Syracuse. Not a huge deal, but a loss for Syracuse could move them to 3-5, which might be enough to bump them down past Virginia Tech and Boston College, who both sit at 2-4. So big game in that regard for Syracuse, and at least gets you closer to teams like Louisville, Wake Forest, and Virginia. At least you're there. You're in the picture. You kind of need this win if you're Syracuse. Now let's talk a tad about the Big 12. We got a lot of Big 12. Oh, you know what? Let's talk about the American just for a second. There's only one team in the American, so I'll talk about it for a second. Houston sits at 5-0. They are obviously huge favorites against East Carolina, likely to win that game. But if Houston is to drop it, they fall to 5-1. They will be tied for first place with SMU, a kind of surprise team in the American this year. Everyone expected Memphis to be that team. I think you got to legitimately start looking at SMU and thinking that might be the second best team in the American. I think it's hard to argue that at this point. 14-4 record, 5-1 in conference. I believe the only loss is to Houston. So, but yeah, you would be tied for first place. With a win for East Carolina, you move to 3-3, which would get you up with UCF. You would pass Memphis in the standings. With a loss, you fall to 2-4. That's not going to affect you too much because you're not going to fall below USF, which sits at 1-4 in conference. But it's obviously not an ideal place to be if you're East Carolina. You obviously would love the win and get to pass Memphis and tie UCF for 6th place in conference. So obviously kind of a big game for East Carolina here. Don't know if they're going to win it, but not. But I don't think they are likely. Now we got the Big 12. Big 12 has the most teams playing in the day. Obviously, you get the West Virginia Texas Tech matchup. You get the Oklahoma State Texas matchup. Oklahoma State Baylor Oklahoma matchup. Kansas State matchup, and TCU Iowa State matchup. Which, if I'm not correct, that's all 10 of the teams playing today. So this conference could shake up a lot right now. Obviously, Kansas owns the top bidding at a 4-1 record. Baylor and Texas Tech are tied for 2nd place with a 4-2 record, and then Texas and Oklahoma State are tied for 4th place with a 3-3 record. So this place could switch up quite a bit. Obviously, with a Baylor win or a Texas Tech win and a Kansas loss, Baylor and Texas Tech would take the lead in the conference. With a Kansas win, obviously they keep 1st place in the conference. With a Baylor loss and a Texas Tech win, then Texas Tech would obviously stay. They would get 2nd place in conference. Obviously it would work the other way as well. If Texas Tech is to lose, and Baylor is to win, Baylor would take number 2 in conference. Texas Tech would fall to number 3. That's also if Texas and Oklahoma State play, so they will determine who will be in 4th place after day, or they're probably going to decide. They might decide who's also tied for 3rd, maybe even tied for 2nd if things fall the right way for Texas or Oklahoma State. If Baylor ends up losing to Oklahoma and Texas Tech ends up losing to West Virginia, then those things can fall their way. Obviously, TCU sits at a 2-2 with a loss with a win. You can move past either Texas or Oklahoma State, depending on who loses there. For West Virginia, obviously, a win for West Virginia would move you to 3-3, which would pass possibly TCU if they are to lose to Iowa State today, and possibly definitely either Oklahoma State or Texas. So a win for West Virginia would get them there. A win for Iowa State would move you to 3-4, and that would probably cause you to pass TCU, which would then sit at 2-3. Not positive about that, but I'm pretty positive. And then you could also pass West Virginia if West Virginia was also to lose on that day. Same thing for Oklahoma or Kansas State, by the way. They all have 2-4 records, so if any of these scenarios work out, again, this Big 12 will likely look a lot different in a couple of days. Now let's look at the Big East. We have only, I believe, one big game. I believe, and that's Villanova is going to be playing Georgetown. Villanova is at 6-2. 7-2 record likely takes the Big East over Providence 5-1 record. No, actually it wouldn't. Villanova with a win would move to 7-2, which would be a 77% win percentage. Right now, Providence with their winning sits at an 83% win percentage, so obviously they would stay atop the Big East. But with a loss for Villanova, you fall to 6-3, which 6 divided by 9, I believe, is 2/3, which is 66%. So that, let me look, 4 divided by 6 would be 2. It would be the same thing. So that would be interesting to see how the tiebreakers work. But they would suddenly, if they were to drop this game against Georgetown, you would drop into a tie with Xavier and UConn. So interesting scenario could work out there. It would have the exact same win percentage despite playing more games than Xavier and UConn have. Georgetown with a win, I've been saying it for a long time now, but Georgetown is ever to win a Big East game, you've only played 4. DePaul sits at 1-6. They've played 7. If you win 1, you will not be in last place anymore, Georgetown. If you can just pull out a gosh darn victory, you could do it. That's basically all that I have to say about Georgetown. I don't think there's any Big Ten games today. I don't believe. I looked through the schedule real quick, and I remember scanning through it. I didn't see any Big Ten games. This was mostly the Big 12 day. Although there's a little bit more Pac-12 and SEC to talk about. Not to mention the one we're going to talk about now, the Missouri Valley. Obviously, Loyola, Illinois, or Loyola Chicago, depending on what they call them, but they have a 5-0 record. Even if they were to drop this game to Missouri State, they would have a 5-1 record, which would be 83% win percentage. With a win by Missouri State, they would get 6 out of 8, which would be a 75% win percentage. Again, regardless of what happens today, Loyola Chicago will be in the top, but obviously if you're Missouri State, you would love to make that lead a little bit less. By the way, with a Missouri State loss, Northern Illinois would move ahead of them, considering they both are tied at a 5-2 record. So consider that from Missouri State, you could lose second place if you don't win this game. Or right now they're tied for second place. You would drop into third with a loss here from Missouri State. That's if Northern Illinois also doesn't play today, though. I don't know about that fact. Let's move to the Pac-12 real quick, where we got a couple games. We got 2, I believe. We got USC playing Utah and UCLA playing Colorado. Again, neither of these teams can move into the top place in the Pac-12, but they can get a little bit closer, right? Obviously, for USC, it would be ideal if you were to win against Utah today and UCLA was to lose to Colorado, because with a win, you would move to 6-2, and a UCLA loss would move them to 4-2. A 5-1 record is probably better than a 6-2 record, if we're going to be honest. UCLA would stay in second place with a win, and USC would stay in third place if they were to win and UCLA was to win. Now, if UCLA was to lose this game against UCLA was to lose this game against Colorado would move to 5-3. Which, I'm sorry, guys. I got to do some math real quick. That would give them a 62.5% win percentage. UCLA would have called a 4-2, which would give them a 66% win percentage. It would stay ahead of Colorado for the time being, but a loss by UCLA would drop them into the same spot as Oregon and Washington. And I don't remember, Oregon does play Washington tomorrow, but they don't play yet. So again, it would be for the time being, but one of those would pass them tomorrow with a win. One of them would fall below them with a loss. So UCLA with a loss would likely be in 4th place. In a couple of days, they would be tied for 3rd place for like a day, but then Oregon and Washington would play, and one of them would move past them, one would be moved below them, right? That's basically where we're sitting with the UCLA situation. A win by Colorado, by the way, would move them to 5-3, likely ahead of Oregon and Washington's 4-2, but at the very least, one of them's going to win. And so it's really a moot point because both of them are playing tomorrow. So if Colorado is to win this game, you move to 5-3, and you will be in 5th place in a day. You'll be tied. You'll be probably in 4th place for like a day, and then you'll be in 5th place because Oregon or Washington's going to win. With a loss, Colorado moves to 4-4. Again, they would not drop any, considering they would have more wins than Stanford and Washington State. But obviously, you don't want to put yourself in a situation where Stanford or Washington State could pass you, because that would put you in a very bad predicament in the Pac-12. Also, Utah with a win, just a single win. Just need to win one, Utah. I know you're on a 7-game losing streak, but win one, guys, and you get to 2-8. You can pass Oregon State. You no longer be last place in the Pac-12. And then we got one more game. We got one more conference to talk about for a second. That's going to be the SEC. The SEC, obviously, we have 2 games going on in the SEC. We got the Auburn-Kentucky game, and we've got We've got Kentucky, Auburn. We got LSU, Tennessee. Obviously, some of the biggest games of the week. But obviously, with a win, Auburn stays in first place. But with a loss, if Kentucky was able to upset them, Kentucky would then suddenly be tied for first place in the SEC, because that would give Auburn a loss and give Kentucky a win, and they would both sit at 6-1 in conference. Now, a Kentucky loss would move them to 5-2. I believe 4-1 is a better record than 5-2. I don't know how the percentages work out, but I believe Kentucky would fall to third place in that instance. LSU with a win moves to 4-3. Let me do the math for you real quick to see if that would be better than Mississippi State. You'd have a 57% win percentage if you're LSU. Mississippi State would have a 60% win percentage. So never mind, if LSU, even with a win, does not move out of 5th place, but they would break the tie for 5th place, right? If LSU was to win, that's also, they were playing Tennessee, so whoever wins that game will be in 5th place, likely by themselves, unless we see Arkansas real quick plays Texas A&M tomorrow. So if Arkansas lose, so ideally for LSU or Tennessee, depending on which fan you are, you want your team to win, right? And you want, you're a big fan of Texas A&M tomorrow against Arkansas, so they lose that one. And then you're a big fan of Missouri also, because right now you are in a 4-team tie with Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, and LSU. Those are the 4 teams, right? If you're an LSU fan, obviously you're rooting for Texas A&M to beat Arkansas, and you're rooting for Missouri to pull off the upset against Alabama. So it would break the tie, and suddenly LSU is in 5th place by themselves and instead of being tied for 5th place with 4 different teams. Anyways, I know this was a long video. I didn't really want it to be this long, but, you know, I think Saturday is a complicated day of college basketball. There's a lot of things going on. So I had to talk about it a little bit longer today. So what team am I going to pick? I got to go with one that I think is likely to happen. I got to go with Tennessee upsetting LSU. It's not really an upset because Tennessee's actually favored in this game considering their own home court. But just looking at the top 25 standings, Tennessee would be the underdog in this matchup. This is why I got to pick Tennessee to upset LSU. I just think it's my best chance of getting a victory. And if I just get a victory, it doesn't even have to be the biggest upset. I just need a victory, and I'm safe for this week. So I'm going to go with the Volunteers to upset the Tigers.